From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of In Focus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. We're here in the 22 News Plus studios talking about education and getting information that is important to you, your family, and your lives, and how it's in jeopardy. I've got with me today in the 22 News Plus studio, Matt Abramovitz. He is the president of New England Public Media. He's across the desk from me today. And if you've been paying attention to the news at all this summer, or this year rather, than you know that funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been eliminated, which has a ripple effect, which is why Matt is here today to talk to me. Matt, thank you so very much. I appreciate your time, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about what transpired over the course of the last 6 months or so.
Okay, sure. I think the big headline here is that in 1967, Lyndon Johnson signed the Public Broadcasting Act that brought in this era of federal support for TV and radio in the public interest. And it was designed to reach all Americans with high-quality educational programming.
Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Masterpiece Theater, NewsHour, all of it.
And the list goes on. And this year, the Trump administration asked Congress to cease funding public broadcasting, and Congress agreed by clawing back the funding that had been previously appropriated in what was called a rescission. And that rescission took place in mid-July. And what it meant was that all the money that had been appropriated for public broadcasters on TV and radio across the country was gone. And so those stations lost collectively about $500 million per year. And so the new world that we're in is that public broadcasting, which has never wavered from its mission of supporting and serving all Americans with educational quality programming, is now going it in a new era without that federal support.
So it's interesting, I quite honestly thought you were going to tell me that the funding cut was significantly more than that, right? Because I look at government as $500 million. I mean, that's not much in the scheme of what's our federal budget, like 1.4 trillion.
Right.
So $500 million really isn't much. So I thought you were going to say it was going to be more than that.
Yeah. So if you kind of did it just based on population, it'd be about $1.60 per American per year. That was the investment. And so I think for those of us in the public broadcasting world, our case would be this is small pennies for a high return. Because not only do you have great programs on the air, we support community events and news, and we have emergency broadcasting infrastructure that is hard to replace, that is vital in a disaster or any other kind of crisis. And so for $1.60 a year per American, this seems like a really good return on investment.
And it'd be interesting to see what our federal government does with that money that they took from you and your other public broadcasters.
I couldn't begin to speculate on that. But what I can say is that not having those funds makes it much more challenging for stations across the country. And we're seeing that stations are struggling. There's an industry paper, and every week there are layoffs around the country, and some stations are even shutting down. In College Station, Pennsylvania, where the station around Penn State is, that station is going to just go dark.
Really?
And so that means that over the last half century or so of building up an infrastructure that reached 97% of all Americans with free over-the-air programming, we're going to start to see holes in that coverage starting to emerge.
So now the funding was cut, which means the CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, disappears.
Yeah. So the CPB is the nonprofit independent entity that sends out the money to stations. And so the way this worked is that Congress appropriated the funds, which on average were about $500 million per year. And those funds were transmitted to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is this semi-autonomous nonprofit entity. It's a non-governmental entity. And they would send the money out to stations. 70% of that went directly to stations. Some of it went to PBS. Some of it went to NPR. Some of it went to some other programs. But without...
So the CPB was the middleman.
Correct.
They were given the money rather than federal government just sending you a check.
Correct. It went
Okay.
through the CPB, and the CPB had criteria to qualify to receive that investment, and certain things that they expected of all grantees. So now that they no longer have any money to operate, they're in the process of winding down. So on October 1st, the CPB officially began its process of winding down and is maintaining a small skeleton crew to take care of some loose ends. And barring some kind of funding miracle in the very near future, it will cease to exist in the beginning part of next year.
So how does that change what our local New England public media, both the WFCR, the radio station, and WGBY, the TV station, how does that affect you and us as viewers every day?
Well, we are going to try our best to make sure it doesn't affect our viewers and listeners every day. It is hard, right? If you were, realistically, we're losing between 10 and 12% of our operating budget um, uh, every year for the foreseeable future. And that's going to make our lives harder. But our goal is to maintain all the quality programming and services that we've maintained so far, but do it a little more efficiently and do some belt tightening as best we can to keep it going.
So do you look at this as a death knell for public broadcasting, or a change in how you do business? So you could, roll up the sidewalks, put a for sale sign on the building and move on with life. Or do you say, you gather your team together and say, okay, we are all invested in what we do. How do we now continue to do it under this new world?
It is definitely that.
Okay.
We are not packing up and pulling up
Good.
stakes. What I would say is that what I've told our team and I tell our board and everyone who listens is that we are not going anywhere. We have a commitment to this community. We have a commitment to the work that we do. It's gotten a little bit harder, but on the other hand, another way of looking at it, because I'm a glass half full kind of guy, is that the internet and the world that we live in and consumer behavior has changed the media business in so many ways, and it feels like it's changing week by
Right.
week, month by month.
Look at what we're doing here.
So the federal funding cuts have changed the pace of those adaptations we have to undertake, but they haven't changed the direction, right?
Okay.
We were going to have to adapt to a new world order one way or the other, and now we just have to move a little bit quicker.
We are up on our first commercial break. We're here with Matt Abramovitz, the president of New England Public Media. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back to the 22 News Plus studio. I am your host, Patrick Berry, and I'm across from the desk from me today is Matt Abramovitz. He is the president of New England Public Media. We're talking about the changes you may have heard in the news this year about defunding the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the dissolution of the CPB, and how that affects our local PBS and NPR affiliates. Matt, again, thank you so very much. I appreciate your time. So when we went to break, we were talking about how you see the glass as half full, how changes were going to happen anyway. This just sort of fast track the changes. What are some of the changes that you're trying to implement at the station in downtown Springfield?
Well, let me give you a couple of examples. I think from at a very high level, one of the things I think that matters a lot in this age is that you have to stand for something, because we are awash in information. There's a million things distracting you on your phones and your computers. And so you kind of need to know, what does the station actually provide and what do they do? And, we are really clearly believe that we are by, for, and about Western Mass, and that we want to be the best resource and the best guide to Western Mass that we can possibly be. And that's one of the things that public media, which is among the last locally owned and controlled and operated media companies in the country, can still deliver. And so you can see that we have a daily show called The Fabulous 413, and we have two great hosts, Khalees Smith and Monty Belmonte, who are super committed to the community, super curious about Western Mass, and really want to tell all the stories, good, bad, and otherwise, about what's going on in our communities.
Good.
And they're on the air every single day with guests from across the four counties, and really showing that commitment. But being on the radio is no longer enough. And this is kind of what I mean, is that we are now taking that show and shooting it for video and posting it to YouTube, because more and more people are using YouTube to find everything,
Right.
especially even their radio shows. So more people are using it for podcasts, for radio shows, and we have to be in that space too, because as I mentioned, the media business is changing. Your consumer habits, the things you do when you turn on the radio or want to listen to something or find out something, you might have once gone to a library or turned on the radio, but now you're Googling something or
Right.
checking your phone. And so we are spending more time getting more of our work onto YouTube, into Instagram, and
Good.
then and trying to make sure that people know we exist and know what we stand for.
Trying to reach the viewers wherever they are.
Yeah.
I mean, and every broadcaster in the country is in the same boat because you can't. What was it? What was the doing the same thing over and the definition of
Right.
insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and
Yeah.
expecting different results. We in the broadcasting business, we can't do the same thing. We need to be innovative and creative. And so I applaud you for that. But
Yeah.
again, those were things that were coming down the pike.
Correct.
But now it's an immediacy.
Yeah, and I think that what we like to say is it's not game over, it's game on. Like this is
Okay.
the time for us to really roll up our sleeves and think about ways that we can be more relevant, more impactful in the community, and make sure that people know the good work that we do. We have a wonderful head of our newsroom, Elizabeth Roman, who is Springfield born and raised, and she is super committed to being a great newsroom here in the community, and she's been doing helping to lead several video efforts documenting Latinos in nature. This is an area of her interest.
Okay.
And this is a great way of kind of changing the view of and the narrative about what it looks like to enjoy the great outdoor resources that Western Mass enjoys, right?
Absolutely.
And so those are the kinds of projects that have taken on a new urgency because we recognize that people know that we do good work, but they need to be reminded of it. And unfortunately, or for better or for worse, they're no longer always sitting by the TV or always listening to the radio. And so now we've got to be more creative about how to reach them.
Talk about getting creative. So you've lost 10 to 12% of your annual budget because of the defunding for public broadcasting. How do you make that up? So you said you're glass half full kind of person. So are you expanding your staff for fundraising? Are you expanding your staff for underwriting? Are you sort of status quo for now to see what the future holds?
We still have a lot of uncertainty. So I would probably say we're not expanding at this moment staff wise. But what I would say has been impressive is the community response. So we just did our fall membership drive, and it has been overwhelming to see people show up.
Fantastic.
The number of new members who have come on board has been incredible because, a lot of people sit through a membership drive. They hear a public radio pledge drive or public TV pledge drive, and they think, I'm not going to do that. They do this all the time. They don't seem to go away. Why do they even need the money? And I think the federal funding cuts have thrown into relief that this really is a need for stations like ours, that we're not making it up. We were federally funded. It was a small part of our budget, but it was still part of our budget. And without those funds, it's going to be harder for us. And I think even beyond the financial considerations that people are bringing to bear when they think about our station, what's been remarkable and notable is that many people overwhelmingly are saying that the thing that is motivating them to give is the freedom of the press.
Interesting.
There's a Walter Cronkite quote where he said, the freedom of the press is not just the cornerstone of our democracy, it is our democracy. And I think there's a lot of people in our community who feel like having honest, quality information that's told without bias and without fear is more important than ever. And they want to make sure that we survive.
But we both know money comes from the extremes, so I look at the national media, you have extreme broadcasters on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side,
Sure.
And they're making boatloads of money because their base continues. So I applaud you for continuing the mantra of stay in the middle, accurate and fair reporting on every angle, no
Right.
matter, and every topic. So it's nice to see that you will continue that here locally, for forever.
Yeah, we are, as I said, we're not going anywhere. We feel really hopeful by this community support. And I think we have a great team who's committed to this mission. And I think that, circumstances change, businesses have ups and downs,
Mhm.
and obviously we're no exception. So I think that we're with this level of community support and the talent we've got on the staff, I think we're in really
Y- From a programming standpoint, you talked about a few local programs. From a national standpoint, things that you might get from PBS. Anything that viewers can see that might be changing down the road? PBS NewsHour going away.
Oh,
Ken Burns
heavens, no.
documentaries going away.
No, as a matter of fact, we have a big Ken Burns documentary coming out in November. We're debuting on the 16th, American Revolution. So this is a big deal,
Timely with
and
the
it is
250th
very
anniversary.
timely with the 250th anniversary, and obviously a lot of questions about what our founders envisioned and how that vision has played out over the last couple of centuries. And so, I think again, in the immediate term, there will be very few noticeable changes
Good.
for most people. I think that there's enough happening under the surface that I couldn't predict what the next year looks like or the year after that. I don't think anybody can. So I think that the system is still fairly robust. It is going to be a challenging time, but at least for now, I don't think viewers or listeners will hear any noticeable differences.
We are up on our next commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back to today's edition of InFocus. We're here in the 22 News Plus studios. I am your host, Patrick Berry. Across the desk from me today, we have Matt Abramovitz. He is right there on the screen, the president of New England Public Media. Matt, thank you so very much for joining me. I greatly appreciate your time. Talking about the changes in your industry, in the public broadcasting industry this year, from the federal government side of defunding public broadcasting, dissolution of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was the middleman, basically,
Right.
to what's happening here locally on our streets. WFCR, no changes, right?
Well, no, none yet. I mean, we are trying to. We have gotten so much community support that really, what we're trying to do is figure out how do we maintain what we're doing, run it a little more efficiently than we had been, if we can, and what kind of community support can we get? PBS and NPR have offered one-time rescission relief this year, but next year will be another kettle of fish. And so we're trying to understand what this community can support and will support, and how to build our business that will have the greatest impact for our community based on that.
So public support, does that mean with the elimination of any monies you receive through the federal government that there's a greater reliance on our local viewers?
More than ever, right? We were always mostly community supported, but now we're really all community supported. And so we are looking to individual viewers and listeners to support us. We're getting great support, as we usually have, from our local businesses. And what's happening in the public media ecosystem is that there are efforts to help shore up the most vulnerable stations right now, coming from large foundations. So there's what's called a Public Media Bridge Fund, to support stations that are really at risk of shutting down. There are some stations where the federal support included up to 30-40% of their operating budget. We're not in that
Right.
category.
Would you say 10 to 12%?
10 to 12%. So that's a haircut we really wish we didn't have to take, but it's not putting us at risk of shutting down. And so right now, the thing that distinguishes public broadcasting is that we've built an amazing infrastructure that covers most Americans, and they get programming that is free. They get programming that is not dependent on having an internet connection. And so that's part of the vision, right? Is to make it free and accessible to all. And so right now, in this moment of transition and challenge, the biggest priority for us as a system is to maintain that universal access.
So how can we, as the general public, help? Is it being a part of the pledge drives?
Yeah, I think that's always the first thing I would say. That even a few dollars a month, people usually start at $5 or $10 a month. Those kinds of contributions don't seem like a lot, but on the other hand, they really help us because they're going on a little bit month by month, and we can plan around it, and the donor
Right.
can too. I think beyond that,
It's funny, Matt. One of the things I say to people is,
yeah,
you also, as the donor, receive benefits not only because you get to see this great programming, but if you put it on a credit card, you get some credit card points too. You can take the family on vacation sometime.
The other benefit is that you get PBS Passport. So everyone who's a member gets access to PBS Passport, which is honestly the hidden gem of the streaming world. Because you might pay $20 a month for Netflix, but there's so much on PBS Passport for a fraction of that cost. You're supporting your local station. You're getting access to Masterpiece, Frontline, Nova, all these amazing things. So that's all included with your membership. I think that the most valuable thing, though, is apart from the money, is really just talking about it and recognizing that an independent and press is an important piece of what keeps our community knit together. And so listen, watch, tell your friends about what you've seen and heard, because that's how we build a shared understanding of the world and even shared conversations about what's important. I mentioned Monty Belmonte and Khalees Smith. Monty hosts a march every year to support the food bank of Western Mass. It's called
The Walk.
The Walk. As you know, he goes from Springfield to Greenfield over 2 days. So it's 43 to 42 miles. And they raise about $500,000 for the food bank. And I guess I would say this. This is a great example of how listening to the radio and the TV, where you're kind of learning about food scarcity in our community, translates into actual action, where you can get out there with your neighbors, raise money for a cause that we all care about, and makes our community stronger. And so when I think about what does public media do that very few other people are willing to take on, it's work like that. It's recognizing that we have a megaphone where we can not just kind of put out great shows, but also talk about the issues that matter to our communities and do something about them. And so that's kind of my hope for us moving forward.
And I think that's a reasonable hope. And I would, if Monty is watching this, which I hope he is, I would say, Matt, you challenge Monty to reverse walk from Greenfield back to Springfield to raise another $500,000 to help the station. So it's 80 miles, Monty. Come on, it's a piece of cake.
I've walked a few hours with him and been sore for a day. So
absolutely.
I don't know how he does it, but I will say that Representative Jim McGovern, who represents a good chunk of this area and is very committed to attacking the issue of hunger in our communities, he walks the whole march.
Wow.
And, you think about all the things and demands on his time, the fact that he is taking 2 days out to walk with Monty and I think he buys a new set of Hokas every time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But that really tells you something about what he stands for. And again, what we're capable of doing if we put our minds to it together.
Matt, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. Talk a little bit about our local New England public media, radio and TV stations, as well as the crisis you're facing, which, fortunately for you, as you mentioned, the federal funding cuts to our local station aren't as great as they are in some other markets. It's a slight workaround, but I have the utmost faith that you'll come out on the better side of it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good seeing you. Thank you.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.